Welcome to Essential Coaching Conversations with Kyle and Asim.
The real, relevant, necessary conversations to help you navigate coaching, teaching, learning, and life.
Coaches, welcome in episode 24 of season 2. I think when we get to season 3, it's not going to be a year where it's not going to be 52 episodes in 52 successive weeks like season 1. Season 2 might go a little longer than the 52 weeks that season 1 took. But either way, we are here, season 2, episode 24. I think we have a pretty awesome episode planned today, especially in response to, or not in response to, but sort of the yeah, why not? In response to our episode from last week, where it was sort of like why like sports has gotten annoying, like I can't stand working in this anymore, or whatever it is, right? All the things we talked about, and how much of a grind sport has become. Today, we explore the fun things about it and why we fell in love with it in the first place, and what it was like with the childlike enthusiasm that we wish our players would play with as children and as young adults. Um, how we discovered that as young people. But as we always start, we'll go with our athlete shout outs. Kyle, I'll throw it to you. Athlete shout out for episode 24.
So this one might be just as easy as last time. 23 being Michael Jordan, 24, no brainer, no doubter for me. I'm going King Griffey Jr. Don't really need to explain much else beyond that. Smoothest
That is
swing of
not
all
where
time.
I thought you would go with that.
One of the coolest, swaggiest athletes of all time. King Griffey Jr., man. Who didn't? I wasn't even left-handed, but I really tried to swing like King Griffey Jr. as a kid. Yeah, that's that one. That one. These have probably been two of the easiest ones for me last 2 weeks. Going MJ and Junior.
There you go. I mean, I think every kid growing up in our era of growing up, probably imitated Ken Griffey Jr.'s swing as best as we could.
Ain't no doubt.
And none of us could even get close. And he's, yeah, I mean, Ken Griffey Jr. is all-time generational athlete, number 24. You really threw me there because I thought you were going to say the K word, Kobe, because number 23 was so easy. We're going to go with number 24 as like a natural progression. But no, I am not going to say Kobe, and I think it's actually timely that episode 24 is happening now, and that this person was a mentor to Ken Griffey Jr. because his father, Ken Griffey Sr., played against and alongside Willie Mays, who just passed away yesterday at the time of this recording. So it's June 19th today. He passed away on June 18th, I'm pretty sure, right? Yeah, yesterday. And so I'm going to go with number 24, Willie Mays, the Say Hey Kid. Again, you and I didn't get to watch him play, but as you said in the pre-show, like we don't have to have watched him play in order to commemorate a life well lived and an immense impact on the sport of baseball and just in general in society. So two very easy ones today. Let's go with our Would You Rather. And this was a Would You Rather that you put forth the other day via text. And I'll throw it to you first. Would you rather win a championship? And this is, whatever level you coach at, whatever your championship is. Would you rather win a championship in your first season as a head coach or your last season as a head coach?
Wow, what a great question.
I don't know. I mean, you are the master of these would you rather.
So to be that guy, I actually got to win one in my last season. So I would have thought, I'm going to say last season, because there is something special about winning the last game you ever coach. and knowing that like they can't nobody can take that away from you, right? Um, I will say, however, I think that that'll be my official answer, but I will say like I was initially leaning towards saying my first season because I do think winning one early in some ways can be detrimental, but I also think it may take some pressure off, like the chase to want to win one, and maybe there is an opportunity for some growth and maybe kind of relaxing a little bit. I don't know. I think again, younger Kyle would not have thought that at all. Um, but I do know, regardless of whether you win one or you win 10, the drive to win the next one is always going to be there. And that's where I think like if you won one early, the frustration and chase of not getting another one might be too much.
Mm.
Whereas if you can win one in your last season and then basically have the ability or the opportunity to walk away on that high, that's probably something that you can't I wouldn't be able to pass up.
Yeah, I'm not going to take the opposite here. I agree with that. I think about like Bob Stoops, right? His first season at Oklahoma, they won a national championship. He never won another one. And I think he was there for I don't know what 10, 12, 15, 20 years almost. Um and that's a long way to go continually chasing that that the replication of what happened when you caught fire or struck lightning or whatever you want to call it in that first season. I honestly would rather take the belt and go. Like I won a championship. It's my only one, and I'm going out as one of the few coaches
Mm.
that can say, like you said, that they won their last game and we got to hang a banner together, and you'll have that forever. Um, as much as the chase is exciting, I'm not going to lie to you, the chase is exciting, but I think it's also a little bit of instant gratification. Like, oh, in my first year, yeah, we won it, and we never win it again. Like, I don't know if I could be okay with that.
Yeah, I think there again, I believe we've talked about this before in an episode. Like there is some detriment to being successful early because you think you already know everything and there's no room for growth. And again, the younger me would have probably been that way. The older me would could potentially look at it and say, okay, you've won one, take the edge off a little bit. You don't really have anything to prove. You could, if you were very mature about it, it's like, okay, you can sort of continue with that pathway where that's not the all consuming thing.
Yeah,
But chances are, if you're coaching in your first season, you're likely pretty young and you're not going to have that mindset or that life viewpoint. So that's where ultimately I would go back the other way. It's not very many people get to win the last game of their seasons and getting to keep that taste in your mouth versus one of like bitter disappointment. Because even if you win three in a row, and then you lose in the championship that last year and that's your last game, like that will always just sort of sit with you, right? It in some ways could maybe outweigh the three that you won. And I've talked about this before. Winning one doesn't really satisfy you at the end of the day. It might take some pressure off for a bit or anything like that, but if you win one, you want two. You win two, you want three. If you win three, you want four. Like that's the competitive nature of everything, and ultimately throwing back to last week's episode about ball not being life, like ultimately that's why ball is not life. And there is more to it than that because winning isn't necessarily ultimately the most gratifying thing in the business and that kind of thing. So at least to me. So that I would definitely want to be able to walk away with that feeling, and it's pretty dang awesome, and knowing that you would have that forever is would be the way I would go.
so let's explore that though for a second, because you've lived that, right, with your time at Simsboro and all that. Like, what did that feel like?
A lot of relief and really like, and again, that's where I think the paradox and the frustration of competition in sport is you'll hear coaches talk about this, like the relief of winning over the joy of win, like the relief of not losing over the joy of winning. Like we compete and you throw everything there is into it, and when you win, it's you're not really celebrating the win. You're just going, "Oh my god, thank God we didn't lose." because there's so many issues and problems and parents and this and that and media and playing time and unhappiness. You're just sidestepping obstacles when you don't lose,
Mm,
right? But there's not as much joy and gratification in winning as we seem to make it out to be. As, at least I think as like as you would say, as like casuals would think, as fans would think, as parents would think. When you're in the middle of it and you're competing and you're a coach or you're a player, winning is fun. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it is. It's intoxicating. It's all those things. But ultimately, like, again, in my experience, I'm speaking for myself, but I think many would agree, it does not fulfill you like you think it will.
yeah,
And that's why you have to continually chase that high again. Otherwise, I think once people win one, they would quit. They would
right,
retire. They would be over. And again, the ultimately the reason I got out of it is because after winning those two, I wanted a third, and quite literally, the program was in such a great place, and we had so much talent. We could have won 5 or 6 in a row. I don't think at the end of the day that would have still been ultimately fulfilling and satisfying. You want to win 7 in a row,
right.
and you have to know, like, okay, it's time to walk away, or it's time to try to go somewhere else or search for that um, elsewhere. And again, it doesn't mean that your competitive nature diminishes. You still compete in other facets of life, um, but I'm not going to sit here and say that it's not fun, and thrilling and winning. But the best thing is watching your kids celebrate,
Yeah,
seeing their joy, because I can coach for the next 40 years. They're not going to get to play for 40 years. They're done. They might have 2 or 3 years left. So seeing the joy of an athlete winning, especially on such a limited time frame in high school or in college, and knowing that the window to win is so tiny and so small, that to me was the best part about all that, is watching those guys celebrate.
sure. No, I remember you telling a story, and you may have even told it on the pod. I don't remember specifically, but I think you and what was it? You and Josh, or you and one of the other assistants had sort of like told each other, "Hey, like
Oh, yeah,
when
Mike,
we
me and Mike.
win."
Yep.
Yeah, you and Mike. You want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, that was advice that I had gotten from my buddy Ben Haddix, who was my old AD at Cedar Creek. He won a state championship as a player, and then at his school that he went to, he won it as a coach. And some advice that he got from somebody else, I don't know where. I'll have to ask him. But basically, the advice was, hey, if you ever get a chance to win it, take 30 seconds, watch the kids. Don't celebrate. Don't throw a clipboard. Don't get dunked with water. Like, just sit there and watch the kids celebrate for 30 seconds and soak that in. And then, make it about you for a little bit. And I remember him telling me that back when I was at Cedar Creek and had no shot at winning a championship. Remember, and just kind of filed it away like, I'll never need that advice. And then when we got a chance to do that, I remember talking to Mike, who was one of the assistants at Simsboro, and we were up pretty big in the fourth quarter, and it was in hand. I think I turned to him on the bench and I was like, "Hey, let's hold each other to this." But I was like, "When this buzzer sounds, like, we're not going to get up, we're not going to jump, we're not going to hug each other's neck, we're not going to high five. We're going to sit here and we're going to watch those guys dogpile, and we're going to watch D and Gianni and Mighty and Keeman and Caleb and Cato and Reggie and, like, Man, our manager at the time, like, we're going to watch those guys and just kind of live and soak that moment up for 30 seconds. Then you and I are going to, jump on each other and hug and throw water and do all that." And that was exactly what we did. And there's a picture somewhere that somebody captured of us kind of standing there with our arms around each other, just watching the guys celebrate. And when we were fortunate enough to go back the next year, we were kind of like, the game was very much in doubt for most of it. But when we finally got to the end, it was like, all right, remember our deal here. We're going to
Yeah,
sit
right.
here. And that, I, I don't remember much else outside of that particular moment, but it was so intentional to remember, like, what that was going to be like, because that's ultimately what you want to remember. And then the next thing I remember from that second one was walking in the locker room and walking into like 3 inches of standing water, in the locker room because there was so much like Gatorade and stuff being thrown around that like ruined my shoes. Um,
Probably
and I,
ruined the locker room too.
yeah, it probably did. Um, and for some reason, I just remember stepping in the room like that, and be like, "What the hell happened in here?" But yeah, so that if anybody ever gets a chance to do that, phenomenal advice that I got from Ben. Don't know where he got it, but it's advice that I would pass on to anybody. Is make sure you lean into that moment and watch your players celebrate.
So the reason I wanted you actually to go into that was because I think it's a nice setup for what we've decided to cover today. Um, and that's like why we love sport and like why we started loving it in the first place. And the stories of you watching kids celebrate with each other and just that unbridled joy that they have in accomplishing something together. Very, very few people get to do that, right? Regardless of how many classifications there are, private school, public school, it doesn't matter. Very few people get to accomplish that. So there has to be some other joy that exists in our pursuit of why we play this game, why we love the game, why we fell in love with it, and why we stay in love with it. And I think, Ben having that perspective to say, hey, Kyle, if you ever get a chance to win this thing, just take a minute and just be and let the kids have their moment. Like, I think that right there is the advice of somebody who still loves the game
Mm,
and is of somebody who understands that the joy, not just of winning, but the joy of doing it together is why a lot of us got into this in the first place. And I have a bunch of notes written down about this, but like, you know, the big overarching piece of this is that you don't get to accomplish anything by yourself. And we talked about Willie Mays in the Open, and he had a quote that I sent to you today that just happened to flash across on Twitter of train like a pro and play like a kid,
mm,
right? Train like a pro, play like a kid, or practice like a pro, play like a kid. And holy shit, Chelsea Gray, sorry, I got the game on in the background. She just threw a behind the back pass to a cutter from the 3-point line. That was unbelievable. She plays like a kid, right? Like she trains like a pro, but she plays like a kid. She plays with joy,
mhm,
right? And it's evident. Um, anyway, so all that being said, today should be a joyous day for us, right? To get to reminisce. And you said something earlier about this might sound like a couple of old guys talking about like, well, back in my day.
no, it's this is let's go ahead and throw the trigger warning out there. This is gonna be two, like 2 washed ups reminiscing about the good old days. Like it will be that episode. They're just let's go ahead and get that out right now. Like we have done, I think, our last 3 or 4 episodes since our birthday. We've talked fearless coach, which was kind of deep and kind of heavy. We talked about adults getting in the way, which got kind of deep and kind of heavy, and we talked about ball not being like it's been a pretty like deep, heavy month or 2.
Yeah.
We need to talk about the fun stuff and the joy, but I do think that some of us talking about that may come off like us just sort of lamenting what the old days used to be like. So I will go ahead and throw that out there right before we
So
get started.
so to that point, what's funny is like as I was writing down notes, I started writing about things that happened when I was a kid. I was like 6 years old and like falling in love with football,
Mhm.
and like getting signed up for basketball. I never played basketball before, but I got signed up for it when I was 5 years old. You know what I mean? Like my mom was like, "You have too much energy. Go over there and play." And I guess I'll like to me, the question is not like was there some singular moment that made you fall in love or want to pursue sport as a career or like stay involved with it forever? I don't think there's one singular moment. At least for me, there's not one like one thing that I can point to and say that was the pivot point for me. I think it was a collection of experiences, but I'm curious, and I'll throw this question to you first, and then we can sort of talk about that
Okay.
question. In your mind, when did you know that this was like, and we'll use basketball as kind of the kickoff for this, but when did you know that basketball and or sport was like your go-to thing that you just loved to do?
Man, that's a great question, and I'm trying to imagine like some singular moment where that was the case, and I don't know if I have that answer. I do remember being in junior high. I grew up, so I grew up playing everything. Like I remember when I was like 5 or 6 years old, I had a year where I played basketball, baseball, football, and I did a year of karate. And probably the same thing, like, hey, kid, go get some energy out. Let's find what you like. And I think I did all those things within a year. And, mom and dad were probably like, all right, we got to pick something. Like, this is a bit much. Karate was like, kind of okay for me. Football, I was terrible at. I didn't even in like flag football, I didn't want to get hit. And there's a couple of stories about me playing running back, being handed the ball, and me running in the wrong direction away from everybody. So play more tag, right? um, so I wasn't into that, but I did like baseball. I did like basketball, and I grew up thinking I was going to be pretty good at probably a little better at baseball to begin with, and then I got kind of tired of it because I was bored being at baseball practice, and I knew I wanted to play basketball. And at some point, it was like in high school, I think I got a chance to like coach a little rec league team, little YMCA team because nobody else was there to do it, and obviously, like it wasn't really anything formal or official, but it was just kind of like, man, that was kind of fun. Like I've always enjoyed playing this game. It was a lot of fun watching other people play this game.
Mhm.
And it was a lot of fun, like trying to teach people how to play this game and share that joy with them. And I remember going to college and was majoring in biology to be a physical therapist and just kind of had to pick something, and I remember at some point during my freshman year of college, I was like, I don't want to be a doctor. I don't want to be a PT. I don't want to sit in, I don't want to, that's just not what I see myself doing. I think I would enjoy coaching. And I can't remember if that really went back further than that, but I do remember coaching a team at the local YMCA. It was probably like fifth grade girls or something. And I'm sure it was terrible and chaotic and I didn't do a very good job, but I just remember enjoying being in that moment. And I remember the day where I was like, nope, I'm going to change my major. I want to coach. And I switched to education. And then, sort of the rest was history. But that's where I think that's the moment I remember that was pivotal for me in terms of coaching. Playing sport, my first real memories of falling in love with that go be really before like organized sports. And this is something I think I had texted you was like, I don't think I fell in love with sport. I fell in love with play.
Mm.
And there is a difference to me in sport and there is a difference to me in just play. And I think maybe harkening back to ball is not life and do adults get in the way? Adults care about sports.
Mhm.
Kids care about play. Kids care about competition at the rawest of levels. And I was with my brother last week and I was talking to him a little bit about some of these top pod episodes and we started like remembering all the games that we played together that were totally made up. Give me a sheet of paper, ball it into a ball. We're in our parents' bedroom hitting the, the paper ball with our hands between doorways, playing like hockey. Like we're playing paper baseball in the living room. We are throwing a tennis ball on the roof trying to read how it was going to bounce to who could catch it, throwing a ball against the wall and see it where it might go. I mean, like the dumbest of little things that were games to us, that were competitive to us, that had nothing to do with organized sport. And it was just the essence of exploration. Hey, if I throw the ball off the wall this way, what's going to happen? How could I catch it? How could I pick it up? How could I do something with it? If I throw it off this way, or if I throw it off the roof over here, or hey, if we try doing this or we try doing that, like it was the love of exploration and play, I think is what I remember the most. And us just like, bear with me on this quick little story, but I remember us being on vacation one time in a pool, and we were playing tennis, and we had the, like the lid on a tennis ball can. It's plastic, circular. If you throw it, it's a pretty decent little frisbee. And I remember us kind of tossing that lid of the tennis ball can back and forth to each other. And it morphed into this game where we were trying to hit the edge of the pool. There was probably like 5 or 6 inches of where the water in the top of the pool was on the edge. And we were trying to see if we could hit the edge of the pool. And we eventually got so good at it that we started playing defense against each other. And so you had to not only hit the pool, but you had to get it past one of us like we were a goalie. So it was kind of like this soccer, hockey, frisbee game that just organically happened one day when we were probably like 8 and 13 years old on a family vacation. To me, that's what was fun about that kind of stuff, because it wasn't really real, but it was just exploration. It was play. It's stick ball at play, out on the playground at school, any of those kinds of things. And I have some of my fondest memories around that stuff, more so than I do organized sport, wearing a uniform, having a number, sitting on a bench, waiting to go into the game. And it's probably because I was more engaged in all of those things, because I was constantly playing. I constantly had a rep. And in organized sport, you're only playing so much. You're having to wait for an adult to tell you how to play, how to do it. Get your rep this way, go stand in the back of the line, sit down, it's not your turn. And I think those are easy memories to kind of forget. Whereas if it's me and you in the backyard and we're creating something, you can't help but be totally immersed in it.
Right. Yeah, no, I would
That
agree
was a
with
very
you.
long winded answer. So I
It's
apologize.
no, that but that's a perfect answer to a very like hard question to answer, right? Like you see this in real time, folks, that like I think especially as you get older, you forget a lot of those games that you made up, right? And like I had the privilege of having an older brother, and he was not too cool to play with me, right? When I was a kid. And same thing, like we would play football like one on one. How do you do that?
Yeah. Throw it, go catch it.
Yeah, right. You throw it and go catch it and hope that he doesn't catch up to you and bat it away. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and we made up our own rules, or like there was, um, I remember one time, like we were at the high school that we both ended up going to, and we were playing basketball and just like shooting around or whatever. And I think I kicked the ball because I was frustrated or something, and it went on the roof of the school. And we were like, well, what are we going to do? And my brother's like, well, we got to figure out how to go up there and get it, because if we come home and we don't have our basketball, mom and dad are going to be really pissed. Right. So then the game turned into, how do I, as a kid, boost my brother, who's a grown man, up onto the roof of this school without us getting arrested, for him to go get our basketball bag? It's like a little Kmart basketball. It probably costs $5.
Right.
Right. But at the time, it's like, holy crap, we cannot go home without this ball because we're not going to have another one. And I think it was like, we talk about constraints, right? And how constraints can be used to like create behavior and whatever. Well, there's the constraint right there. You cannot go home without the ball if you like don't want to get your ass beat. You know what I mean? Like so I think even in those moments you find love for adventure and you find love for the chase. And I can even remember like, at after school care or at recess. I mean, I don't even know if kids have recess anymore for real. Like I know my wife actually teaches second grade. They have a recess teacher, right? Think about this for a second. They got second graders out there with a paraprofessional teacher who is coordinating the games for them. Back when we had recess, like we couldn't wait and think about this too. Like we had just probably eaten lunch, right? And you what are you eating at lunch at school? Like you either take your lunch or like it's a bunch of crap on a tray. And there was no stretching, there was no warm up. You started running.
Go play.
Go play. Here's the like mesh bag of balls. Some of them might be inflated, some of them might be messed up, whatever. Figure it out. And like you have a series going that week with you and your buddies, and we're playing basketball, and like, hey, we won 3 yesterday. Oh, we only have time for 2 today. Like, let's go.
Mhm.
Right. And then there's like bragging rights for the rest of the day. And it meant nothing. I don't remember whether we won or lost those series. Who cares? But that was what you talked about all day. Right? Like it's just what you did. And then you had your gym class and it was the same thing. And like you fall in love with it not because the adults tell you, "Hey, this is something you should like to do." It's because there's like this innate thing that kids have that they just want to play. And they will make up whatever they need to entertain themselves.
Mm.
And if they have a buddy, this is where I laugh because it's like, "Hey, sports keeps kids out of trouble." Well, yeah, it does. But like, do they have to be super organized to the point where if we were to just leave a bucket of balls out, could they figure out something to do? And I think that was what helped me fall in love with sports and fall in love with playing. But then as a coach, I had like for the longest time early in my career, I like fought the instinct that had been sort of like become my thing of like, why not be creative? Oh, because Dean Smith's book said to do this.
Mhm.
Right. And you start to like, when you start to be influenced by, well, this is how this person did it, this is how that person did it, you start to lose that childlike sense of wonder of like, well, what if we did it this way? Right. You're talking about the tennis can lid. Like, what if we threw it this way? Like, how do you learn to throw a frisbee? You don't, I mean, you could watch some YouTube video now, or you just go out there and like throw the frisbee. And if it goes where you want it to go, great. Why did it do that? Like I think there's some of that that just, for lack of a better phrase, like back in our day, that existed because all this club sport infrastructure and all that other stuff didn't exist. Or it wasn't readily like available to everyone. Right. You had your parks and rec leagues and your independent leagues and stuff like that, but it wasn't like it is now with AAU and all of this stuff. And like I think the more adult centric, and we talked about this in our previous episode of do adults get in the way, like the more adult centric play became, the more important sports became.
Mm. I think there's something too about like the further away you are from the house,
Yes.
the more important it is all of a sudden. Like
Right.
we never traveled outside the parish to play
Right.
as a kid. Like you had your local rec league and you played in that, and that
Right.
that was good enough.
Right.
There
We had
was no
like 4 or
need.
5 different places that we played when we were kids. And then
Mhm.
as you got older, you got to play on the high school courts on the
Mhm.
weekends. Like that's just how it was.
Well, I think like go to like recess and okay, everybody's played tetherball.
Oh yeah.
Everybody knows what tetherball is.
Yep.
How many times do you think in the history of tetherball an adult taught a kid how to play tetherball?
We learned it in PE, and the instructions, I think, if I remember correctly, were probably like 10 minutes.
Hit the ball.
Hit the ball.
Like here's the rule.
Right. You just
And
got
then
to
you go
wrap it
over there and
around.
you figure out like, okay, if I hit it this way, it may smack me in the face. And there's an outside stimuli
Mhm.
that I respond to. I don't want to get hit in the face.
As
But
a
could you
glasses wearer since second grade, tetherball was not my thing. I'm just gonna throw that out there. I was that guy that got hit in the face every time.
but could you imagine like how ridiculous it would be if somebody was signing their kid up for like tetherball lessons? $60 an hour to go get tetherball lessons, and it's like stuff like that. But like, if you didn't know anything about sports, if you didn't know anything about basketball, baseball, hockey, dance, gymnastics, like if you were an alien who showed up on this earth and you saw the difference between like one sport and the other, and parents were paying $100 an hour for swing lessons or $100 an hour for tetherball, they would look at that and go, "That's freaking dumb."
Yeah. No, I mean, like,
Because you would think, okay, well, if I paid $100 for these lessons, then I would be good at it. Why are we not good at it?
mhm,
It's not like, I mean, athletes are definitely more skilled. They're bigger, stronger, faster, more explosive. Like they're doing things like the worst dunk in a dunk contest now would have been the best dunk in a dunk contest 20 years ago. Like I
sure.
get that. But it's not like basketball is being played at a more beautiful in a more beautiful way. Like baseball in the major, I think I saw a stat today. Do you know how many teams, Major League Baseball teams, are hitting over 260 this year? Zero.
Which is insane to me.
Do you know how many were hitting 260 50 years ago? Like 80% of the teams. So is baseball like has the game changed or the way we're playing the game changed? Is it necessarily better? Is it worse? Like to me, you would think like there would be an evolution of where like we have mastered the game of basketball and we haven't. And I'm not
Mhm.
saying that we ever will, but you would think with the amount of resource, with the amount of quote unquote experts that are out there, with the amount of people that are telling you that they have this game figured out. And if you buy this or you pay for me to come in, I'll teach you the perfect way to play this and that. In a lot of ways, like the sport is unwatchable to a lot of people.
Me being I am one of those people.
You know, like you would think that by now we would have it figured out, which should tell you that trying to quote unquote figure it out is a fallacy. And we would be more likely to get that way if we would remove ourselves from it. And so, again, I don't want to get back into the necessarily this become an adult get in the way conversation because we've gone through that. So, taking it back to like a little bit more of a gleeful and joyful experience, like you've talked about this a number of times, like getting cut from every team you ever tried out for or whatever. But like, why did you keep going back? Like, why did that first no remain a no? Like, what drove you to want to keep trying it? And because it's not like, hey, you didn't get to play on this team. It's not, that doesn't mean you didn't play anymore.
Mhm,
You still found ways to play
mhm.
because it's not because you weren't in love with the sport. You were in love with the play. Am
Yeah.
I wrong?
No, you're not wrong at all. I mean, I think I also just, like, there was I didn't know what I didn't know, right? I didn't know what everybody else was doing because there was no social media telling me what everybody else was doing.
Mm,
Like, I was over in my little corner of the world, and I was, like, I was shooting on my hoop in the cul-de-sac and, like, going to the park with my friends, and, like, that's what I thought everybody was doing, and I'm sure, like, who's playing county basketball versus playing house basketball, and, like, sure, right? All of those things existed, but we didn't play the comparison game as much. And for me, like, I went back over and over and over again because I wanted to play for my school because, like, that's what I just thought you did. Like, that was the thing. Like, you grow up going to the basketball camps at your school and you see the players that came before you, and there's this certain level of, like, lineage and things like that that you want to be a part of. And specifically for basketball, growing up in Northern Virginia, like, basketball is everything there. It's not a football state at all.
mm,
You know what I mean? As many players as come out of the DMV, like, very few of them are coming out of Fairfax County. It is a basketball first place. And so, like, you grow up with this insatiable love of the game and of playing the game and just organically, like, going to the park and there's people playing there. And play remains something that people do specifically with basketball for a long time in Northern Virginia, DC, Maryland, that whole area. Like, it is a thing. Um, and you just wanted to be a part of it. But at the same time, like there's also so many other opportunities to play that if you don't get what you want at the high school, like you can go play in a very robust league. You can referee, you can coach. Like they have like all of those opportunities were there. And I think, I remember back to when I started officiating, there was a guy, and I may have talked about him before, Dave Kendall. And like, I was pretty down on myself for not making the team. And he was like, listen, man, like there's gonna be a lot of times in life, like life says no to you.
Mm,
Don't lose the joy for this game and for what you love to do. Like, don't do that. You just go out there and have fun with it. And like he sort of got me into the officiating piece, which I then, like, now as a coach, that's why I treat officials so well, because I played that game too. And that was a challenge because you had to see the game in a different way and you didn't have a rooting interest of who was going to win or not. You wanted to make sure you were maintaining the peace and calling the game the best you could. And so I even think in that way, right? Like that furthered the love of play because you knew what fair play could look like, right? Because think about when you're on the playground, what's the worst thing that can happen? Somebody's not playing fair, right? Somebody's not playing by the rules that we have established that we're playing by, right? So, like, either, you call your own fouls or anybody can call a foul. If we're playing 21 and I tip you at 13, you're going back to zero. But if you're, or you're at 12, you're going back to zero. If you're at 13, you're staying there, right? And if you're not playing by those rules, it ruins it for everybody else. And so officiating actually brought forth more of that in me, where I was like, hey, we can actually have a ton of fun if we play a clean game, right? And like then you go and you play at the JCC or the Y, and it's like people over there, beating the shit out of each other playing basketball. It's like, no, I'm good. I don't want to play that, right? I didn't sign up to do that. I want to play basketball. I don't want to play bully ball or like get into a wrestling match with you. That's not fun
mm,
for me. Um, but I want to go back to this idea of the adult involvement. I think in our youth sport experience and even our youth play experience. And there's one really vivid memory, and I want to share it because I think it may bring something out for you as well. So growing up, like we lived in a pretty, I wouldn't say super, I would say fairly densely populated neighborhood. Um, houses were relatively close together, and we had a bunch of neighbors that kind of had kids around the same age. And so when I say the same age, like I was born in 1988, and I think my next door neighbor, they had one son who was my age, a daughter who was around my brother's age. He was born in 1981, so he's 7 years older than me. Across the street, there was a guy who was my like in between me and my brother, I think, or maybe he was my brother's age, and then they had an older sister. She was never really around. At the end of the street was my best friend, and there were three kids, one daughter who was older than me. He and I were the same age, and then he had a younger brother. And then down the street the other way, there were a couple kids who were like a few years older than me, but not as old as my brother, so on and so forth, right? So we had a bunch of kids around the same age. And so as we all started to get a little bit older, kind of like around like the age of 8, 9, 10 years old, we could have a lot of pickup games.
mm.
And at first, it was a lot of just the kids playing pickup, right? We didn't have to leave the street to play games. We could go down by the pond. We could go down, well, it was quote unquote pond. It was like infested with, it was disgusting actually. But now that I think about it, like we should not have been hanging out over there. Um, we had a number of places where we had open fields, or like we had, just like areas where we could play, or it's somebody's yard or whatever, right? So like cops and robbers and all this stuff. But I have this vivid memory of one night. I don't know how this happened. I don't remember the impetus for this happening, but the adults and the kids were playing pickup football together, just in the middle of the street. It wasn't the adults telling the kids what to do. It was, hey, we're going to play with you.
Mm,
And my dad, I don't know if he played or not. My brother and I played. A couple of dads in the on the block played, people are standing outside, they're all interacting, they're having fun. You're seeing, and now I think about it, right? Back then, you don't know this. But now, as an adult, I can reasonably think about this and say, like, these adults were modeling like healthy peer relationships, right? Like
Mm.
neighborly relationships, asking each other about their jobs, asking about their families, all of that stuff. And I remember the sun is setting, sunset was kind of like the time everybody's like, hey, we're going to go inside, whatever, right? And we throw a Hail Mary. And this is something straight out of like the Sandlot, right? Or whatever, Angels in the Outfield. I can't think of a football, like a kid's football movie. Little Giants,
Little Giants.
straight out of Little Giants. I had not caught a pass the entire time. Like I have fucking butterfingers constantly. I still have butterfingers. I am not like I can catch a basketball, but like in full stride of football, like there's something, there's a mental block, whatever. So last play, Mr. Pugnetti, I'll never forget this. The end zone was his driveway. All right. So he lived at the end of the street. His son Greg was my best friend growing up. And we didn't go to the same school. I think that was the other thing. Like he went to a private school, I went to public school, but we got to hang out after school. I go, like I'm going, and he throws me the ball and I catch it for the winning touchdown. I'm not sure how many kids now can say they would have a similar memory, right? Where
Mm.
the adults were involved and they were just like you. And that like celebration that we talked about at the beginning, right? With you and Mike watching the kids.
Right.
He's like a big dude, right? He was not in shape. He comes lumbering down the street. So everybody's going freaking crazy, right? Because it's a little walk-off touchdown. That makes you fall in love with playing, right? And if I had dropped it, probably telling you a very different story,
Mhm.
but I didn't. And I think then, like, you think about your time at recess, you think about your time at, anytime you're playing pick up something with your friends, you'll remember that forever. It's like, hey, this gives me a little bit of confidence because I did that with the adults we're watching, right? And like, I don't know if you have any core memories like that, but that is something I'll never forget. And now it's being immortalized on the podcast. Like that happened, right? And that was like a seminal moment where I was like, man, playing is awesome. And again, it's like you talk about it for the next like week, and here I am 30 years later, still being able to recall what that night felt like. And I think about the players that I just finished up coaching at Worcester Academy or, at Brandeis or at Woodson or at South County or any of these places. And I think about like, could they name a moment in an AAU tournament that they got schlepped to like that? That's just that like organic. I don't know. I don't know if you have one of those.
Yeah, my mind goes to, it was probably 4th or 5th grade, uh, recess outside. We had this massive, like, concrete slab that we played on. There was, like, tetherball, there was some, uh, hopscotch, there was, some things like that, and then we had some playground equipment and things like that, but I remember us playing, like, baseball, stickball every day, and, like, myself or one of the kids, like, there were a couple of us that were better at, like, making a good baseball. You wad up a couple of sheets, you get some tape, you make it pretty dense, whatever. You could throw a pretty good fastball with that thing. We'd go out there, we'd organize a game, and like you said, like, we might not finish the game today, but we're gonna pick it up tomorrow, and it's 4-3 in the 5th inning, and we were gonna play as many days as it took to finish 9 innings, and then we were gonna run it back. And, I remember I was not the I was probably one of the upper average, kids on the team, and we had a couple of I went to school with some really good baseball players. Ended up being like really, really good baseball players, D1 level, pro level baseball players, and grew up playing around those guys on the play pad. And there was a moment where I accidentally got a hold of a ball and I must have made the ball just right, like, but a home run was like over the building. So, you'd have to make 3 or 4 balls every day because if you hit one and it was gone, like, it was literally gone because a home run was on top of the roof, and I never really got to hit many of those, but I had a similar, like, walk-off experience where I got a hold of one, probably made the ball just right, couple guys were on, down, down 1, whatever, right before recess is over, because like, there's no, like, clock or timer out at recess, but you can always feel, like, when the teachers are about to blow the whistle and be like, "Alright, it's time to go in," so you're rushing, and I got an opportunity, and I yacked one over the roof, and it was, like, long gone, that ball's never been found, and got a chance to kinda walk that off and be the hero, and then, of course, you go teacher blows the whistle, the game's over, the team that lost, they're pissed, we're going crazy. You go inside and then, like, it's tough to settle down for math because you wanna just talk about, like, hitting the walk-off home run or whatever, and I remember that, and again, that had to have been 4th or 5th grade. You're 9, 10, 11 years old, something like that, and I remember watching that duct taped ball go over that wall like it was yesterday. I don't remember much else. I don't remember what the exact score was or anything like that, but I can still almost feel the way the ball felt going off that stick bat and watching that thing fly over the roof. And yeah, I mean, it was the joy of just playing and competing and getting an opportunity to, be successful and win and that kind of thing. But it's like every kid out at PE was chasing the opportunity to have the chance to hit the walk off home run, and then you get the opportunity to do that. And um, it's a great question. If like how many, again, sounding like these guys, how many kids these days have a moment like that they will recount 30 years from now? Because I do think the difference again is most of their childhood memories is going to be centered around sport. Our childhood memories were centered around play. And I think that is going to be one of the major differences. And I'm interested in how like our childhood and our parents and the way we grew up, it shaped how we turned into adults. I'm very interested to forecast 20, 30, 40 years from now when these kids are adults and how is this commercialized and commodity style sport life, what type of adults does that produce? And then how does that forecast into what those kids' playground experiences might be?
So I actually have a theory about this.
I'd love to hear it.
And it's part of this theory stems from, I want to say it was Jensen Huang, who's the guy who owns Nvidia. It might have been somebody else. One of these AI billionaire people. And they said in the next 5 or 10 years, people are going to be craving human interaction. Right? They're going to be craving like in real life type experiences, stuff like that. I think, and this is my theory, I think that 30, 40 years from now, those kids that are kids now that are having that experience, or even like 20 years from now, they are going to be seeking out play. And I think there's going to be a rise in like adult centric play experiences. So like you know how there's the what's it called? Like the trampoline parks,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
like or
We've had a
stuff like
couple
that.
here. Yeah.
Yeah. I think they're gonna have like adult oriented stuff like that. Where
Interesting.
adults can just go play.
Like more Top Golf.
Yeah. Right. But it's like you come at your leisure. Here you pay a flat fee. Here you go. Go play. Have fun. No referees, no like none of that. Just figure it out amongst yourselves, go play. And that's why you see, even I mean, it's starting, right? You've got the trampoline parks, you've got axe throwing, you've got top golf, you've got rage rooms, you've got all this stuff. What is that, right? It's all play, but it's in a corporatized environment that is familiar to the adult that grew up in that, right? So I think there's going to be like a lessening of that corporatism, and it's going to be just more like free space to just go do whatever you're going to do. I think that's what I think is going to happen. I would like to see that happen because I think
Mm,
that's where you gain friendships. And so I think that's the other piece of this that I had written down, at least, like, like learning to compete, stuff like that. I mean, that's just like stuff that happens through this process. But the big thing was like, for me, was learning to settle disputes and then playing with your friends. And I think if you think about like society largely, we have trouble right now settling disputes. We can't do it. Conflict resolution is not a thing. When you're on the court as a kid, conflict resolution has to be a thing. You can't just take your ball and go home,
mhm.
right? And I think the other part is just like creating bonds through play. And I even think like you're a science teacher, right? Isn't that like a human thing that like human children make bonds through playing?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a different form of interaction and connection. Like, that's got to be hardwired, evolutionarily speaking, into a species.
Right,
Because if you don't have that instinctually, you don't survive.
right.
If that doesn't exist, 100,000 years ago, we're not sitting here today. It has to be somewhat hardwired in. And the more you do that, connect this and that, that's where I feel like we've drifted away from some of those more natural things because we are trying to artificially create a different kind of experience. But I don't think, we're ever going to fully get away from it because it is, again, it's like hardwired into our DNA. And that's where I feel like if your theory comes to fruition, I think that's going to be why, because like we're going to have a pull and a drive to do something like that. And if you could open up a trampoline park with some goals in it or something like that, and my nearly 40-year-old self's got a chance to go in there and break a leg, like I'm going to want to jump around for a little bit and kind of go crazy. I would have preferred if nobody was in there to watch me make a fool of myself. Um, but I mean, even to this day, like I'm 39, my brother's 33. If we get a chance to make up some goofy ass game and compete over it and then like yell at each other about it and get mad, but then want to come back and keep playing because it's fun, like we're still going to do it. Like
$100%.
I don't know if that will ever go away.
No. I mean, it's just like playing video games, right? Like, I played Mario Kart the other day, and I was trying to get the last of the 3 stars that you get when you finish first 4 times in a row in the Grand Prix, right?
Yeah.
And I finished second in the 3rd race, and I, like, threw the controller, and I was like, "I hate this game." And then I picked the controller back up, I hit quit, and we're gonna do it
We're
again.
gonna play again.
Right?
Run
Because
it
'Cause I'm
back.
trying to get this star, and I'm not gonna waste my time with the 4th race if I'm not gonna get the star. Right? So we're just gonna like start over and we're gonna do it again. Like I have moved away from using Toad. I have been Toad for 30 years in Mario Kart. And you know what? I was like, you know what? Screw you, Toad. You're not getting the job done. So now I'm gonna be somebody else, right? And like, yeah, gotta go to the bullpen after 30 years of pitching Toad. We're gonna bring out Koopa Troopa and see what happens. But yeah, I mean, like that's the experimentation part. That's the fun part. It's like the challenge that hooks you back in. And it's an addicting thing to say, "No, I want to do this again. And I want to do this again. And I can't wait until tomorrow. You know, God willing, there is a tomorrow
Mm,
to go out at recess and beat my buddies at insert game here." Right. Or even when you're playing like Mouse, do you ever play Mauser ball in
no.
PE? So
What is
I
that?
mean, maybe my PE teacher made this thing up, but it's like a combination of like bowling and dodgeball. So you set up like 4 pins on the baselines, right, on each side, and
Oh, you're trying
then
to
you're trying to hit the
hit the
pins.
yeah, 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 yeah.
But if you hit somebody, they are out. So then it's one less person that's guarding the pin,
Played,
right?
yeah, yeah, for sure.
So like even
I
that,
don't know what we call that here, but it's same thing.
yeah, like there's all kinds of these games that exist. And it's like, all right, you know what? You got me today, but I'm gonna get you tomorrow. And then that is how like positive peer relationships form and you fight and you figure it out. It's like, no, I caught it. No, you didn't. You know what I mean? Like, and you figure it out. And like that became so addicting. And now as an adult, I find myself wanting to figure it out.
Mhm.
Like I don't run like shy away from, this is a challenge. I don't necessarily want to do this. It's like, no, I can figure this out. Right? Like you don't quit on a fight with your significant other just because it's inconvenient for you now, or like you need somebody else to step in. Like, no, like you learned how to do that when you were a kid, and that then shows up later. And I mean, I just that got me really fired up talking about Mauser
So
ball.
I've no, it's funny you say that. So I don't know how long we've been going, but I've got to get this in. So shout out to my wife. Father's Day last weekend, she surprised me with a PS5. I haven't played video games in years. I don't have time, right?
Right.
But college football is coming out July 19th. One of the cool things about my job now is getting to see some behind the scenes and how that game is put together, and like getting different assets and uniforms and the stadium, and like getting to kind of help get Louisiana Tech's information into the game. That's been really cool. So I want to play that. Well, you can't play it if you don't have the system, whatever. Megan surprises me with a PS5. Kendall has never played video games as a kid. It's just not something we've ever done. We've never really had a system in the house, anything like that. So I get this PS5, playing a little bit. She's like interested in it. We go find like some little kid games. I don't have any idea what these games are. They're some sort of obstacle course kind of thing, sort of Mario ish. Um, and she, of course, we hand her the controller. How do you play? I don't know. I've never played Light Snake before. I don't know what the hell this is. I've never played Good Guys. I don't know what any of this stuff is. Let's see. Just start doing something. And so she just starts running, hit a button. Let's see what happens. Okay, this button means jump. This button means dive. Oh, you ran into the red thing. You're dead. You got to start all over again. And it was hilarious because within like a minute, she's screaming at the TV because she's frustrated because
It's
she doesn't know
innate.
what to do.
It's innate.
Yes. She's like, "What's this?" Blah, blah, blah. And then she's like, "I don't want to do this anymore." And then 2 seconds later, she's like, "Give it back. I want to try it again. Daddy, help me. I don't know what to do. How do you play this? Baby, I don't know how to play this. Let's figure it out." And
Yeah,
it was
right.
hilarious because it was like rewatching my childhood all over again within the span of like 2.5 minutes, because she went from being so joyed because she was going to try a game to being like so pissed off because she didn't know how to do it, to being so frustrated, to being over it, to being like, forget this, to going, nah, let me try it again. And then the next day, it's like, hey, can we play that game again? Oh, I figured something out. I learned that if I do this, this will work. There is no
She's
blueprint.
she's over there taking notes and like slept on it, and she was like ready to go
I
back
mean,
and
think
do it
about it,
again.
right? But there's again, like nobody was paying an $80 an hour lesson in how to beat Light Snake.
Right.
You just
Right.
have to figure it out. And again, that's part of the frustration, but it's also part of the joy because you fall down, you get up, you fall down, you get up, you die in the game, you lose your turn or whatever. And then eventually you finally figure something out and that light bulb moment happens and aha, you win. Because again, it's not organized sport. It is about the play. It's about the exploration. You give me some game that I don't know anything about, there will be joy, there will be elation, chances are there will be frustration beyond belief, but eventually you're going to turn the corner on it. And that's where I go back to all those years and lessons and games and things that we played in the classroom, building the roller coasters, trying to get the ball in the cup. Hey, put these two chemicals together. Let's see what happens. Well, this turned this color, this turned that color. Why do you think that is? What do you think happened? That's why I love science. That was my favorite thing about being a science teacher, was learning through inquiry because you had to constantly ask and explore. There's not necessarily a right or a wrong answer. There's just a next answer. And the next answer leads to the next question. That next question leads to another answer and invariably leads to more questions. And to me, that is what this whole journey is about. Whether you and I are trying to be coaches, whether we're trying to be educators, or whether we're trying to work in collegiate administration, whether we're trying to be friends, husbands, fathers, whatever, we're trying to own our own business. Like we're going to try stuff, we're going to screw up, we're going to learn from it. And hey, getting your taxes together as a first time business owner is a learning experience. You get a little better at it the next year, you get a little better at it the next year, you learn what questions you need to ask, you learn about work that you can do in February, March, and May that's going to make life in December and January easier next year. That is what all of this is about. And again, it has got nothing to do, and again, in my humble opinion, all the lessons and tricks and skills that I think we have at 36, 39 years old, respectively, can be traced back to those earliest first moments and memories that we've got catching touchdown, walk off touchdown, catches in the driveway or hitting walk off home runs or making up some stupid ass game with a tennis lid in a pool or playing balled up hockey in mom and dad's bedroom trying to score a goal on your brother. Like all of that stuff. And I think a lot of that success that you and I are having now could be traced directly back to that, and that being play, not sport.